Mr. Chair, yes, go ahead and do that. And I think we might still be one short on a quorum.
Oh, okay.
Correctly.
I'm happy to wait if you think we might get that one, and I can wait.
Let's wait just a couple minutes here. I think we have.
Okay. Very good.
Getting close.
I understand Bob has already agreed to be counted twice if we need him to. So
there you go. Mr. Chair, I think we're good to go now.
All right, very good.
Need to confirm with a roll call.
Will do. All right, thank you. A virtual meeting of the MAG Management Committee is now called to order. Please remember to unmute your device before speaking and mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for all attendees. If you are participating by phone, you should use *6 to mute or unmute and *9 to raise your hand. At this time, I'll have staff take a roll call of the members so we can establish quorum.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Management Committee. I will go down the list of members by member agency. Please unmute and indicate if you are present. Bryant Powell.
Present.
Thank you. Charlene Pania.
Present.
Thank you. Roger Klingler.
Present.
Thank you. Gary Neese. Carrie Dyrek.
Present.
Thank you. Josh Wright.
Present.
Thank you. Crystal Dykes.
Present.
Thank you. Brent Billingsley.
Present.
Thank you. Phil Dorchester. Grady Miller.
Present.
Thank you. Kathy Valenzuela. Kathleen Curley. Rob Bohr.
I'm here.
Thank you. Kevin Phelps.
For the preliminary engineering to be completed. But we're hoping that.
Thank you. Jolie Cairns.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Kulaga.
Present.
Thank you. Matthew Williams.
Here.
Thank you. Joy Rich.
Here.
Thank you. Rick Horst. Chris Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Jill Kymack.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Tyne.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Barton.
Here.
Thank you. Leo Liu. John Cross.
Here.
Thank you. Alexis Tamron Kinsey.
Scott Smith is here for Valley Metro.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Jennifer Jack.
Present.
Thank you. Jim Thompson.
Brent Stockwell here for Jim Thompson.
Thank you. Bob Wingenroth.
Here.
Thank you. Reyes Medrano. Chief Brown. Gene Blackman. Jody Rooney. And our chair is here. Is there anyone that I missed? Thank you. We have quorum.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I do want to note that we have a new member joining the MAG Management Committee today. That would be Bob Wingenroth, City Manager of Surprise. Welcome, or I should say welcome back to Bob.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good to be back.
Very good. Our next item on the agenda is call to the audience, item number 2. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. So I would ask MAG staff, have we received any public comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Management Committee. No public comments were received for the call to the audience or any other item on the agenda today.
Very good. Thank you. We'll close item 2 and move to item 3. Our next item is the Executive Director's Report. MAG Executive Director Eric Anderson will now give his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can go to the next slide. I have 3 things for you today. First of all, it's more recognition for the great work that we do here at MAG. FHWA recognized MAG for Innovation of the Month as part of the Everyday Counts program. Everyday Counts is a Federal Highway Administration program that encourages innovative developments on the highway side. So this is for our use of crowdsourcing data. We're now we get real-time vehicle data from some of the data that's transmitted from new vehicles. We're using that now in our transportation planning work. It actually is a lot more efficient and cost-effective to monitor traffic that way. So we also received some good PR, if you will, on the Ryzen show and 12 News on the same issue last month too. So that's our modeling, transportation modeling group take credit for that. Go to the next slide. We're very happy to participate in the launch of Peoria's Robo ride. This is an autonomous shuttle that serves the Plaza del Rio area. Had a great event there celebrating the kickoff. This is part of our emerging technology program here at MAG. You'll see the vehicle there, and as well as Mayor Carlott and some of her council members on the demo ride. So that's a 6-month test of that vehicle out there. And so we also have ASU on board to do an evaluation of how that autonomous shuttle actually performs, as well as collecting user information about how users see the service too. So look forward to that. Once again, it's a 6-month pilot. We should have the evaluation results in the fall of this year. Go to the next slide. Also happy to report that our 2020 CAFR, or Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, was again recognized by the GFOA Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. So that's the 23rd year in a row that we received that award. So, Mr. Chair, that completes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And please contact Eric after the meeting if you have any questions about his report. Closing item 3 and moving to item 4, that is the consent agenda. The approval of the consent agenda, items 4A through 4O are on the consent agenda. Does any member of the management committee have questions or request a presentation on any of these items? All right, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
This is
Mr.
Brady
Chair?
from Fountain Hills.
I'll
I
second.
move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion to approve for Mr. Miller and a second from Mr. Billingsley. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. With that motion and second, I would now ask for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Management Committee. I will go down the list of members by member agency. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Bryant Powell.
Yes.
Thank you. Charlene Pania.
Aye.
Thank you. Roger Klingler.
Aye.
Thank you. Carrie Dyrick.
Aye.
Thank you. Josh Wright.
Aye.
Thank you. Crystal Dykes.
Aye.
Thank you. Brett Billingsley.
Aye.
Thank you. Phil Dorchester. Grady Miller.
Aye.
Thank you. Rob Bohr.
Aye.
Thank you. Julie Cairns.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeff Kulaga.
Aye.
Thank you. Matthew Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. Joy Rich.
Aye.
Thank you. Chris Brady.
Aye.
Thank you. Jill Kymack.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeff Tyne.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeff Barton.
Aye.
Thank you. John Cross.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott Smith.
Aye.
Thank you. Jennifer Jack.
Aye.
Thank you. Jim Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you. Bob Wingenroth.
Aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed?
Yeah, this is Glendale. Aye.
Thank you. Anyone else? The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. We now close item 4 and move to item 5, items proposed to be heard. Item 5 is an update on eviction data presented by MAG Regional Homeless Project Manager, TJ Reed.
Hello, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. We are going to talk a little bit about data from Arizona related to evictions and then some national data as well. Next slide, please. Specifically, we're going to be looking at information from census pulse surveys, and many of you I think are familiar with this or have used it, but for those who may not be or that is a new concept, the census wanted to provide more up-to-date figures on particular issues, specifically in this case related to housing. And so they actually do smaller scale surveys and sampling. Unfortunately, this does not get into all of the detail that we like, and it's small, but it is useful information. And so they have it for the state and for Maricopa County. Unfortunately, they do not have that for Pinal at this time. We're going to look at some local data, and then I'll share some key takeaways related to the eviction information. And we have a brief announcement on the point in time count as well. Next slide, please. So one of the things that is asked in this pulse survey is what are the % of Arizona renters who are not currently caught up on payments? And as you can see, this has really gone up and down with kind of the prevalence of COVID and infection rates. However, right now that percentage is 12%. One thing I will share as well, if anybody is interested, there's a professor out of U of A, Keith Bentel, who is doing a lot of research on this at this moment. Wanted to give credit to him for analyzing some of this data. And if any of you would like to be connected into a deeper level related to some of this information, please let us know afterwards. All right, next slide, please. We really wanted to highlight the fact that those who are low income are being overwhelmingly impacted by this, as well as people of color. And so this shows that those behind on rent, you can look at the percentages here. So of those who are behind on rent, which it may seem obvious to you that those who are lower income are going to be more likely to be behind on rent, but we wanted to highlight this in general that 77% of those behind on rent are below 50K for their annual salary. And then 72% of that are people of color, which is pretty astounding when you're looking at that compared to the general public. And we also show the percentage that are currently unemployed, which is 55%, and half are households with children. Next slide, please. So this I found really interesting and wanted to share this information with you. So on the left-hand side, you'll see how many months behind on rent certain folks are. So you see from 1 month all the way to 6 months. So many people are behind 2 months or more. Also on the right-hand side is information related to rental assistance throughout the state, which is sharing 1% and 2% respectively are people who applied and received assistance, and those that applied for assistance and are waiting on responses. And one of the things that was really interesting to us here, and I'll share this later too, is we're really interested in supporting you all with sharing information around the great efforts that are happening through our communities related to rental assistance and eviction prevention. We also want to share that despite those great efforts, there are so many people who are still not getting the assistance that they need. And that's just kind of astounding in our, and that is throughout our entire state. Next slide, please. So with this, we wanted to share some data of those that are behind on rent. This is how they responded to a survey of how likely they are to be evicted in the next 2 months. So again, this is not of all renters. This is simply of the people who are behind on rent. They share their likelihood of being evicted. And so you can see here that 24% state that they're very likely that they will be evicted in the next 2 months. And if you expand that to somewhat likely, that goes up to 44%. And one thing that we want to highlight with this pulse survey, this is all self-reported and based on the individual's perspective, right? So we shared with you all months ago that there, based on this poll survey data, roughly 20% of all renters, or roughly 80,000 people in Maricopa County, were facing evictions when the moratorium ended. As you'll see in just a moment, that data is not fitting to that projection. And this is due to a lot of different things, but one of that is people's perception is not always necessarily the reality of the situation, based on all the variables that we're seeing with assistance and how landlords are reacting as well. Next slide, please. And so one thing that was really interesting that we wanted to share here is this estimates the number of households behind on rent within the county based on that pulse survey data, and then also sharing the total debt and the estimated amount of debt that each household has. So that's 54,000 households. That's in total about $146 million in debt. And they estimate $2,700 per household is that debt, which you can imagine as you're trying to pay back and that continues to raise, it can be really hard to feel like you can catch up at all. Next slide, please. And so based on all of this information from the pulse survey data, this is really where they share that 54,000 individuals and households are facing or at risk of evictions in this time. And so the top column, you'll see we share 10% results in displacement, which would be about 5,400. And below that, if 20% result in displacement, that would be just under 11,000. To the right, you'll see the impact on the homelessness sector based on 25% or 10% of those people who are displaced. And so the point of this is really to just show that these evictions can have, even at this low rate of 10% of those displaced, that's still 1,400 additional people experiencing homelessness. And this can be a sobering thought as we're all trying to grasp and understand how to support those who are struggling in our communities with consistently rising rents. Next slide, please. So this was actually just updated, I believe, 2 days ago from the Maricopa County Justice Courts. You can see our eviction levels. The core takeaway here is that if you're looking year over year, we are still not caught up to pre-pandemic levels within that within the time periods that we were looking at. We are up substantially from last month, but last month was substantially down from the previous. So one of the core messages here is many thought that there would be sort of a wave or a tsunami of evictions that were coming up. That is not evidenced through the Justice Courts data. However, I really want to caution us as we look at this information to understand that people in housing are losing their housing for other reasons as well. Many are, and we're going to actually be adding other data sources and looking into this further to share with you. But many are reporting that simply the lack of renewals, right? If rent goes up $200, $300, $400, it's not an eviction. It's just you're not able to renew or get into your lease again. There are lots of properties being purchased as well that are having an impact on this. So though the numbers for evictions are not pre-pandemic levels or even soaring above that, we want to be mindful of the other contextual pieces that may be impacting this to be artificially or lower than we would expect. Next slide, please. For those interested, this is a heat map of those evictions. And so you will have access to this to look in more detail, but this is something where you can sort of see visually where some of the hot spots are. Those red spots that you'll see are more than 1,000 evictions in 2021. And then you see a lot of yellow. That yellow is 251 to 500. And then the rest of the colors you can, again, see for yourself afterwards if you're interested in your local area. Next slide, please. The other factors that we're going into some of this is we are seeing, and many of you, I'm sure, were looking at the federal numbers that were coming out, but in Arizona, unemployment is lower than it has been since the pandemic started. So we're seeing steady declines in that area, though there are other contextual factors there of a significant amount of people not rejoining the workforce, as again, I'm sure you're well aware. But we wanted to highlight this as another piece to the puzzle of people being able to pay for rent. Next slide, please. So we wanted to share a couple of key takeaways. This is a lot of information and don't want to make it useless to you all. So on this, eviction rates are still below pre-COVID levels, right? That is a fact based on the justice courts data that we're seeing. We are noting again that the projections and some of the national data are misaligned with what we're seeing in the actual data. So those projections, as we saw, we're talking substantial percentages of the population being behind or being evicted, and that is not what we're seeing in the actual data. However, again, some of the speculations on the reasons that low eviction rate may be happening is due to a few different factors, and I am eager to share more with you in the coming months of what that will look like in terms of quantitative data that we can share with you all, because we don't want to just sit here and speculate without looking into those details. But due to the average rental rates increasing, we do speculate that people are being effectively evicted by not being able to renew their leases, either by force or by simply the fact that the number is too high for them to sustain on their income. The last thing here, I did want to pose a question to the group. We know many of you on the call, or some of you at least, are administering eviction prevention and rental assistance dollars. Would you all find it valuable if MAG worked with those agencies in a ways that is legal, because we know there are some stipulations on how to share data, but putting that data together and sharing that as a group of the expenses that are going into and how much rental assistance has gone forward. There are some dashboards with individual jurisdictions, but if there is interest from this group and others on putting that information together to show some of the collective impact and also the distribution, we would love to hear that feedback from you all. Next slide, please. And like I said, so we wanted to share a brief information around the point in time count. This is happening the morning of the 25th, starting at about 6 a.m. Some will finish their count in their local areas by about 9. Others will go until about midday. Our primary contact is Nikki Stevens, the manager of our homeless programs here. Her email address is there if you're interested in getting more plugged in or more information. There is some information on MAG's website as well. The link is here, and you can also just navigate to programs, homelessness, and you'll see a point in time section there as well. So we want to make sure you all have the information you need to feel like this process is going smoothly. And if you have any hesitations or questions or comments, do not hesitate to reach out. And with that, back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you so much, TJ. At this time, are there any questions or comments from the membership or feedback you want to give regarding the query that TJ posed in his presentation? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I can just a quick comment. This is Jeff in Peoria.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the presentation. This is really enlightening on what is such a complex project and issue, but clearly is a growing one. I think any opportunity for us to share information and to gain more insight on how to approach this would be helpful. So for what it's worth, just want to pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I'll just say on behalf of Tempe that we do quite a bit of work in rental assistance and utility assistance through directly and through our CAP designee. So we would be interested in sharing that data as well as part of a regional effort to get more information about sort of those leading indicators of, pre-eviction type activities. I had a conversation before this meeting with MAG staff. One of the other things that it might be more difficult to obtain, but might be worthwhile could be utility assistance / utility shutoffs, either from the locally run water utilities that many of us have, or even from SRP and APS if they're willing to share it. Of course, that's part of the challenge, but it would seem like if people are facing the potential of having utilities and or obtaining rental assistance, that it's likely that eviction, if they're renting, may not be far off as well. Not to mention foreclosure potentially. So all that information, I think, kind of tends to fold back up into what we're trying to get to, which is to understand the problem and craft solutions along the way. And any of that would help. I certainly would be interested in having Tempe participate along with the rest of the region. So thank you. Anything else from anyone else on this item? All right. Thank you again. We'll go ahead and close item 5, and we'll move to item 6, which is the MAG Freeway Noise Analysis Study Overview. This will be presented today by MAG Transportation Planner Arminta Syed in coordination with Dr. Aaron Hastings of the Volpe Center. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of Management Committee. My name is Arminta Syed, and I work as a Transportation Planner 2 here at MAG. I'm here today to provide an overview of our freeway noise analysis study, an effort that's been ongoing since spring of last year and just concluded with the update provided to TPC in November of 2021. Next slide, please. So I'm joined today by our project manager, Dr. Aaron Hastings, who will help present the details of our study efforts and findings. Before I hand things off to him, I'd like to briefly spend some time discussing the history of pavement use in our region and how it led to the request for this study. Following that, I'll hand things off to Dr. Hastings before we end today by going over some recommended next steps and answering any questions you may have. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the map shown on this slide here in front of you shows our regional freeway system. Since the time it came online around the early 2000s, it was covered with a rubber asphalt overlay, which has a useful life of 10 years. At the time, funding was only programmed for the original installation of the surface treatment. And in fact, that original overlay, has only been replaced as part of a reconstruction project included in our regional freeway program. As a result of this situation, over 50% of the current overlay that you see on our freeways is past its useful life. The colors on this map indicate the original year of installation of that current overlay. The sections in red represent pavements that are our oldest installation, originally implemented between 2003 to 2011. In fact, some of these segments are nearly 15 to 17 years old. Next slide, please. Stemming from this situation, in 2019, MAG and ADOT partnered on a study to better understand the status of the rubber asphalt overlay and alternative concrete-based noise reduction pavement surface treatments available. The study found that while rubber asphalt does have a lower initial noise level than diamond grind, that noise level increases over time until ultimately by the end of its useful life, those noise levels are equal to or higher than concrete-based alternatives. In March of 2020, an overview of these findings and possible options moving forward were presented to MAG policy committees. At that time, discussion indicated support for further exploration of concrete-based surface treatments as an alternative to the rubberized asphalt overlay. Next slide, please. MAG was directed to work with ADOT to identify potential project candidates to be included to pilot the diamond grind surface treatment. On June 24th, 2020, the MAG Regional Council approved the diamond grind pilot program. As part of that approval, 3 project scopes were modified to replace rubber asphalt with a diamond grind surface treatment. These 3 projects are shown on the map here in front of you, and they include a segment on Loop 101 Price Freeway from Baseline Road to Loop 202 Santan, a segment on Loop 101 Pima Freeway from I-17 to Pima Road, and finally a segment on Loop 101 Agua Fria Freeway from 75th Avenue to I-17. Since then, the first two projects on Loop 101 Price and Loop 101 Pima have been open to traffic. To evaluate the results of the pilot program, ADOT agreed to assess life cycle costs, quality of ride, and public acceptance of a ground concrete surface treatment. I do want to emphasize, as we look at these options and we weigh the trade-offs, both options, including diamond grind, do represent a continued investment by the region in supplemental noise reduction that is above the standard. Next slide, please. Following the completion of the first project on Loop 101 Price Freeway, ADOT received numerous public complaints about increasing sound levels. The density of these are reflected on the map in the middle. In response, ADOT staff went out to take some initial noise readings at the same locations where they had conducted prior readings in 2013 when a rubber asphalt overlay covered the area. Results are reflected on the map here on the right-hand side, and they show that noise levels were similar to that from 2013, and all were below the federal and state noise threshold. On February 17th, 2021, an overview of the current situation along the Price corridor was provided to TPC. Next slide, please. In addition, ADOT staff conducted other initial technical analyses, which are part of the pilot program evaluation criteria. These are summarized on this table in front of you. However, as a result of the public feedback received, MAG was given direction to undertake an independent freeway noise analysis study, which led us to kick off this initiative. Next slide, please. Once we were given the direction from TPC, we began researching credible subject experts in the field, and in April of 2021, the MAG Regional Council Executive Committee approved the selection of the US DOT Volpe National Transportation System Center to lead this effort. They are a non-for-profit affiliated with the Federal Highway Administration, and they're meant to serve as the federal resource in providing transportation expertise. Dr. Aaron Hastings, who has a PhD in the field and over 20 years of experience, is the project manager on the study. Following that approval, we executed the contract and kicked off the study. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Hastings to go over the details.
Thank you, Armenta. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for this presentation. I'll be discussing things at a high level, but of course, as Armenta said, I welcome questions if we want to delve into things. If we go into the next slide, please. So the purpose of this study was to provide an independent evaluation of the two pavement types in the Maricopa County region. To do this, we characterized the noise from these pavements in three different ways. The first of these was the overall level, which is the standard and simplest way to compare two different sound sources. The overall level is a single value that sums the energy from all the frequencies and averages the sound over a period of time. Because of the simplicity, the measurements are easy to compare, but the measurements can miss some details. So in addition to the overall levels, we also looked at the frequency of the sound. This is an important detail that affects how a sound is perceived, not just in its loudness, but some of its other characteristics. For example, a noise can sound sharp if it has a lot of high frequency content. It can sound dull if it has a lot of low frequency content. If it has tones that are in high frequencies, it can sound piercing. And if it doesn't have any tones at all, it can sound noisy. So all of those types of characteristics are really described by the frequency content. So we looked at that as well. And because there were also some concerns about the level differences between some people's measurements and other people's measurements, we also were concerned about time variation. So we considered how the noise changed over time. The time scales that we looked at were on the order of hours for some types of measurements and on the order of days for other types of measurements. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this map shows all the study corridors that were included in the study. These consisted of 3 corridors with diamond grind and 4 corridors with rubberized asphalt. The rubberized asphalt covers the full range of pavement conditions that were available in the region, from new pavements all the way up to pavements that are in need of being replaced. The diamond grind pavements, all of these are new. That's just a limitation of what's available. However, it's important to recognize that the diamond grind pavements were basically derived from existing sub-bases that had been installed at different times with different contractors. So there's still some variation involved with those diamond grinds as well. If we go to the next slide, please. To capture the sound characteristics of the pavements, we utilized 4 different measurement techniques. There's some cartoon or illustrations here of what those are. So the first is wayside measurements. The second is a residential measurement. The third is EFR measurements. And the fourth is OBSI measurements. Each of these techniques had a different focus. Wayside measurements are conducted using a sound level meter near the roadway and are intended to quantify the total noise character from the road. This includes not only the noise due to the tire pavement interaction, but also the noise that's due to engine and aerodynamic characteristics of vehicles. This is a standard technique that's used for most noise studies for highway noise, and it's useful for general comparisons. Residential measurements are very similar to the wayside measures as far as the techniques go, but in this case, the sound level meter is located in a residential area. Measuring residential areas is the way we're able to capture the noise from the freeway at the residence location. So we capture the noise environment for the resident. However, because we're doing these measurements at a different location and the levels are different, it's not as loud in the residential area, there's more risk of contamination. So you also get, for example, animal noise, people talking, the local traffic also influences those. So there needs to be additional care to handle those contaminations to the data. Going back to the OBSI and EFR, these are again source characteristic measurements. The OBSI measurements are similar to the wayside in that they are very focused on the roadway itself. However, this method is actually even more focused than the wayside measurements. By attaching 2 microphones to a moving vehicle through some intricate wiring and mounting, we're able to capture the noise specifically related to the tire pavement interactions. And this is particularly important for this study because that's exactly what we're looking at. The OBSI measurements give us the best direct comparison of the noise characteristics of 2 different pavements. Finally, we did EFR measurements as well. These data really reflect how, sorry, no pun intended there, reflect how much the pavement will absorb or reflect sound. The data from these are inferred from measurement of 2 sound, from 2 microphones. As you can see in this little illustration, there's 2 microphones and a source. And based on the interference pattern between those, you will get different levels, and you can infer the effective flow resistivity or EFR from those. It should be noted that between all of these 4 measurement types that we conducted and the data analysis that we did afterwards, that this study really represents a comprehensive evaluation of the issue. You can say we left no stone unturned when we were trying to understand what's going on with this. If we go to the next slide, please. So the study was conducted in 2 phases. In the first phase, we really focused on screening suitable locations for the measurements and obtaining a general understanding of the noise environment in these locations. There were 2 types of sites that we were looking for during this phase. We were trying to identify suitable residential and suitable source locations for measurements. The residential measurements, they're important, kind of as we've talked about before, because they provide a better understanding of the resident's experience. And they do reflect changes in noise between the source and the residents due to meteorological effects and intervening terrain. So those are the things that we're capturing specifically when we're doing the residential measurements. Because these sites are more sensitive to contamination, though, we do need to use a different noise metric for those. Instead of using the standard average level, we use what's called the L90, which is a statistical measure of the noise level. For the source measurements, these are important because they provide the direct comparison between the pavements. So the residential helps us understand the resident's experience. The source measurements help us understand why those experiences are different. They provide a better direct comparison of the pavements, and they are sensitive to, importantly, the pavement type and condition. The wayside measurements are also affected by vehicle speed and the number of vehicles, but we can normalize that out. The OBSI data, those are more robust to those because of that close proximity to a single vehicle. But all of these basically help us understand what's going on at the source. If we go to the next slide, please. In the second phase, this is when we really collected the majority of the data. These measurements took place between September 7th through the 19th. And we had a total of 8 wayside measurements, and they were conducted along 6 of the corridors in the region. So we had a total of 7 corridors. 6 of those included wayside measurements. A total of 4 EFR measurements were conducted along the corridors. Each of these corresponded to one of the wayside measurements. And we had a total of 19 short-term residential measurements. These included measurements along 4 of the corridors, but focused on areas where complaints had been received, such as the ones you see in the map to the right. Each of these measurements were about 20 to 30 minutes long. So these were really capturing a snapshot at residential locations. To capture longer measurements of the residents, we also did long-term residential measurements. For this, we did 6 of these, and these were measurements that lasted for 7 days. So we captured an enormous amount of data for these. And these were used to analyze temporal variation of the noise environment. So we really understood how the noise was changing over time. These measurements focused on the price corridor, but other sites were also included. For the long-term measurements, we did take care to make sure that the site selection included a range of geographical locations so that we were able to answer questions that were also related to the meteorological effects. So if you again look in this map to the right here, by doing measurements on the west side and on the east side, we were able to understand weather effects that are related to, for example, wind speed. By doing measurements in the north and south, we're able to capture even more information, including things such as temperature inversions. Finally, we did the OBSI data were collected at a total of 11 locations along all 7 corridors. So that South Mountain corridor, we only did OBSI measurements there, but we focused on doing some there because that was the newest rubberized asphalt pavement. So it gave us the best range of conditions there. If we go to the next slide. So the previous slides were really focusing on the general overview of testing, and the next few slides are going to cover a high-level overview of the findings. These are roughly organized into findings that are related to the residents and their experience, and then some findings that are related to the sources. So first of all, this study did find that the maximum sound levels associated with freeway traffic noise measured on residential properties, we did not find that they indicated a significant impact resulting from the use of diamond grind surface treatments. This independent analysis is consistent with the assessment that was conducted by ADOT in the fall of 2020 that Arminta referred to earlier. And in particular, the maximum sound levels for the short-term residential measurements were 64.2 dBA, which again is below that action level. And for the long-term residential measurements, the maximum level was 59.3. The diamond grind levels were actually similar to those obtained for aged rubberized asphalt. So for the pavement that it was replacing, the levels were actually quite similar. And again, currently this is the dominant pavement type in the region. It's not new rubberized asphalt, but aged rubberized asphalt. Because of the similarity in levels between the new diamond grind and the aged rubberized asphalt, we really expect that the noise levels that are being experienced by residents in these diamond grind corridors are really actually pretty similar to those that are being experienced by other locations where there is already existing aged rubberized asphalt. If we go to the next slide, please. So as I was just showing a moment ago, all the residential sound level measurements were below the federal threshold for noise mitigation action. It can also be seen in this figure that there was a considerable variation over the course of the day, but one day is similar to the next day. So this is consistent with a lot of the residents' comments that when they would do measurements, they were seeing different levels than when someone else had come out to do measurements. In general, the measures sound levels varied between 10 and 20 dB, depending on the site over a 24-hour period. So depending on the time of the measurement, different results could obviously be obtained. Now, we guarded against this in our study by using the long-term measurements, so we're capturing everything. But we do see that it does definitely depend on when you're doing the measurements. If we go to the next slide, please. Based on all the data analyzed, the sound level variances that we observed were deemed to be the result of two different factors: the traffic patterns and the meteorological effects. Excuse me. And traffic patterns are an obvious culprit. The strength of the meteorological effects was impressive. Morning peaks tend to be a result of traffic volumes. For example, if you look at the weekend traffic peaks, you can see that these are lower than others, and we find that they correlate with lower peak levels in the noise data at residential locations. If you look at mornings in general, you find a very strong correlation between those. For the evening peaks, these appear to be related to the temperature results. So if we look at how the temperature is changing over time, starting in the evening going into the morning, we find that those temperature changes that are likely to create what's called a temperature inversion in the atmosphere correspond to an increase in noise level at residential locations. And this is conspicuous because at those same times, the traffic levels are actually low. So we're seeing an increase in level, even though the traffic levels are low, and we can relate that to those indicators of temperature inversions. It's important to note and understand that these variances do exist regardless of the pavement type. These characteristics are not related to the pavement. They're just related to the traffic and the meteorological conditions. So they will affect diamond grind and rubberized asphalt more or less equally. If we go to the next slide, please. So the last couple of slides, we were really talking about the findings that are related to the residences. Now we're going to move on to some of the source-related findings. So the first of these is related to the two different pavements based on the overall levels in the spectral analyses. In general, the measurements indicate that both the quietest and the loudest pavements were rubberized asphalt. And this is due to that age difference. You have new pavement and you have pavements in poorer condition. The figure to the right summarizes the OBSI data for all measured pavements. The blue lines represent diamond grind pavements. The red lines represent rubberized asphalt. Solid lines provide average results, while the dashed lines show the range between the loudest and quietest pavements of each type. So there's a lot of information in this slide that's trying to be condensed down to some simple graphics. But if you look at the figure, you can observe, for example, that below about 1,000 hertz, if you look along the x-axis, below about 1,000 hertz, all the diamond grind pavements are significantly better than the aged rubberized asphalt. Not better than the quietest rubberized asphalt, but are significantly better than the aged rubberized asphalt at that point. If we go to the next slide, please. It's actually interesting to note that if you look at the quietest diamond grind, so that would be that lower blue dash line, that can actually produce even lower sound levels than the best performing rubberized asphalt below 600 hertz. So there are locations in the frequency, along the frequency axis, where the diamond grind is doing better than the aged asphalt that it's replacing. And in some cases, it's actually doing better than the best rubberized asphalt. It should be noted, though, that in general, the louder levels of rubberized asphalt in these low frequencies can indicate that it's going to be more difficult to mitigate the noise once it's produced for those pavements. Low frequencies tend to be more difficult to mitigate because they travel over barriers more easily and they're not as attenuated by atmospheric absorption as much as high frequencies. This is just the general physics of how those things work. So when you see high frequency content, that's easier to mitigate. When you see low frequency content, that's harder to mitigate. So even when they do have lower levels, it's when they have lower overall levels, if those levels are driven by low frequency, it may be more difficult to mitigate those. All of that being said, it's still important to recognize that with few exceptions, the rubberized asphalt in its best condition does outperform the diamond grind. But this is tempered by the expectation that that performance will decrease over time. So if we go to the next slide. Based on all the data collected, not just the data that we've presented here, but the full data, which will be in the report, we can come up with basically four key points. First of all, sound level variances on residential properties are the result of traffic patterns and meteorological effects. And as we said before, these exist regardless of the pavement type. New rubberized asphalt initially provides the largest amount of sound attenuation, but these benefits will diminish over time to the point where it is acoustically worse than the diamond grind. And when you're replacing that aged rubberized asphalt with diamond grind, you're not really getting an increase in noise levels. And somewhat surprisingly to me, you're also not creating an annoying pitch either. Those high frequency contents were actually very comparable. So that was an important finding as well. So overall, if you look at it, when you're considering that replacement of that aged rubberized asphalt with the diamond grind can actually produce a net decrease in sound level compared to the existing aged rubberized asphalt. So at this point, I would like to turn it back over to Armenta to talk about the next steps. Thank you.
Karen, so if we can just go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So when we presented these findings to TPC in November of last year, we did not request any action at the time. However, we did discuss some next steps recommended from a staff perspective. And as per the discussion and comments that followed, support was indicated for these next steps. So first of all, like Aaron mentioned, since it was found that the varying sound levels that we measured as part of the study were not driven by type of pavement surface treatment utilized, we do recommend expanding the diamond grind pilot program so that we can continue to explore this alternative surface treatment. As we do that, we do feel like we will have an opportunity to further continue to assess the noise characteristics of this diamond grind surface treatment, particularly as we'll be able to use more real-time accurate data to do a before and after analysis instead of using older data as proxies, as we as previously mentioned, as we did for the price segment. And then finally, because we did find the effects of meteorological conditions affecting sound levels over the course of a day, we do think that we should continue to do some further research and testing of temperature gradients of both pavement types so that we can determine if one is more suitable than the other in dealing with meteorological effects. So as of right now, we are finalizing our technical report, which will contain all the details of the study efforts. There will be nothing new in this report. It's just compiling everything that we've done, all the details, and that will be published to our website at the end of this month. And we're also working on drafting what this next phase of continuing to explore this diamond grind pilot program will look like. And we plan to update TPC shortly, hopefully next month, sometime in spring of this year. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, our presentation is concluded and we would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Syed and Dr. Hastings for the very detailed presentation. I'll go ahead and open it up to members of the membership at this time for any questions or comment?
Andrew? It's Chris.
Yes. Go ahead, Chris.
So thank you for the study and, really getting down to the details and kind of eliminating those variables or identifying those variables. This does not mean, I'm not trying to be facetious here because it's a real situation. Is the assumption then if you grind off the rubberized asphalt and don't do a diamond grind, that will be louder than the other two options? Yeah. So I guess, and this isn't for you all, but Eric, I would request, and maybe Mr. Chairman requests, we have a discussion with ADOT because they're already ripping off rubberized asphalt across the valley on the 60 with no plans to replace it. So we're stuck with a horrible rideability on the freeway. And now we have noise levels that are exceeding either one of these options. And I don't know, since ADOT hasn't had any discussions with the local communities that are affected by this, I guess I'd like to know what their plans are. I worry that since we had the discussion about what was going to be funded in the next Prop 400 and we didn't include maintenance, that ADOT is trying to get our attention somehow. So can we have that discussion, Eric? Because we're doing all these studies here, yet at the same time, it's from our experience in Mesa, they're already stripping off the rubberized asphalt, but I don't know that anybody's made a decision about what the next step is, whether it's just going to stay in that condition or what. And it doesn't seem to be that condition meets any of these criteria just by stripping off the asphalt and leaving it undone. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the management committee, Mr. Brady. I think ADOT is being proactive on taking some of the really heavily damaged rubberized asphalt off the system because of some of the safety issues, both in terms of the pavement chunking, as well as just it's almost potholes. It doesn't penetrate the concrete, obviously, but it's kind of jarring when you do hit that. And there's sections out here on the 101 that had that same treatment. So I think ADOT is being proactive in that regard. We will talk to ADOT and come back to the management committee with some updated information about what the long range plan is. We did include money in the extension for some kind of pavement treatment in the future too. And so that was included. That's not considered kind of regular maintenance. That's what we call capital maintenance.
Okay.
And so there is money in the extension to do something. And so once again, the results of this study are designed to inform that decision on which way do we go from a life cycle standpoint. And it's a little tricky because, as the study indicates, rubberized asphalt in the first 2 or 3 years does have better sound attenuation qualities. But after that time, the diamond grind has a longer life in terms of that noise reduction capability. So that's in a nutshell. So we've been waiting for the results of this study to really have that more informed discussion. So we will have that and be back to the management committee when we can.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thanks, Eric. I would just comment that I'm not sure if you took a survey of the residents along the 60 that they would agree that the sandblasting they've received and the chips in their windows they've received because of the work is any better than we were before. And I know what you're saying about the missing pieces of asphalt, but the rideability today, I mean, it's ripped continuously in all lanes. And I'm not sure that we've created it's not a very positive impression about our freeway system to have it ripped up like that without having a immediate plan for what we're going to do. So I guess nothing else, I'm asking that we hurry up and get this decided about whether we're going to make a short-term decision with rubberized asphalt or diamond grind. And then we need to go back to these areas where they've already stripped it off. And we need to do something much sooner than later because it's a bad experience. We're getting complaints about broken wind or cracked windshields and paint getting blasted off. And frankly, the rideability is rough. And I don't know that it's much safer than, and I agree with you, it was bad before. I don't know that we went from bad to bad or bad to worse. So just some thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any other members with questions or comments? Okay, appreciate the presentation. Let me just add, Dr. Hastings, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
And I think you probably covered this at least in passing or indirectly, but is it fair to say that an increases in traffic intensity along freeways, whether it be diamond grind or old rubberized or new rubberized, has an effect on the total amount of volume of noise from the freeways?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And I note this, and again, appreciate your detailed presentation and the work, but from MAG staff, to say that part of what when I hear this, and I'm mindful of Chris's comments, is it's a reminder that, you know, long-term investments in things like transit, transportation corridors, alternate modes, all of those things, while not directly related to freeway noise, certainly over time can have an impact if it decreases the use demand of freeway itself. So, you know, I can't help but note that in listening to what you're saying, and I understand, and I really appreciate the next steps. I would just ask that my fellow members think about that as we, you know, move in towards Prop 400 extensions and discussions about lots of different things that we do in the region in regards to transportation, freeway planning, transit planning, that, you know, decisions that we make in some areas can in fact have impacts in other areas as well. So with that, again, I thank our presenters on this item. Anything else from membership? Okay, hearing none. This item is on the agenda for information discussion only. So we will go ahead and close item 6 and move to item 7, which is the legislative update. MAG Policy and Government Relations Director Nathan Pryor will give this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Management Committee. I'll keep my presentation brief today. Of course, we saw in late 2021 the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the infrastructure bill. We're still waiting for guidance on that from Federal Highway Administration, FTA, our federal partners. So we're looking to give a more complete report at an upcoming meeting. That way we can see the hopefully positive impacts to the region, to the state, and how that aligns with our planning efforts. So more to come on the infrastructure bill. Of course, the state legislature did start their activities this week. Primary among our activities is enabling legislation. So extension of Proposition 400, the house sales tax in the region for transportation. We are working to get the bills introduced, hopefully by early next week, understanding that Senator Pace is intending to hear it in his Senate Transportation Committee, of which he chairs on January 24th. And then similarly, Representative Carroll, bill sponsor on the House side, chairing the House Transportation Committee, is looking to hear the bill on January 26th. Just like to thank both Senator Pace and Representative Carroll for being the bill sponsors on the enabling legislation. We continue to work with the business community quite a bit. This includes tracking meetings with legislators. So thanks to you all, our member agencies, your elected officials, your government relations staff, and working to have those meetings with your respective legislators. That tracking is going very well as we coordinate with the business community. Just a note too, the business community is holding, as recent as yesterday, a lunch and learn with legislators. We had the opportunity as MAG staff to present the plan elements and then go through some of the bill details and other information related to the enabling legislation, opportunity for questions and answers. There's 2 more of those scheduled. So we'd like to thank the business community for their assistance in reaching out to legislators. So a lot more to come on this. Of course, we continue our bill tracking as we do every year on the issues that do affect MAG more broadly, even outside of transportation. So we'll be looking to give more reports on legislative activity in the state that does impact MAG in the region. Mr. Chairman, that completes my report. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Are there any questions from membership? Okay. Hearing none, this item again is on the agenda for information and discussion only. Item 8, moving on to item 8, is a request for future agenda items. Are there any future agenda item requests from membership? Hearing none, we'll close item 8 and move to item 9. Are there any comments or announcements from the membership?
Mr. Chair, this is John in Queen Creek.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief thank you for all the communities that helped Queen Creek in the transition to our new police department on January 11th, after what seemed like a very short 18 months transition process. But this would not have been possible without many of your staffs and many of you personally that helped with the transition. And I just wanted to thank the entire team as part of that transition process, and notably our East Valley communities too, that were so instrumental in some of the more detailed work that was part of the transition, as well as Maricopa County and Pinal counties as well. So I just wanted to mention of that. And again, thanks very much.
Thank you, John. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, this is Carrie Dyrick.
Yes, go ahead.
John beat me to the punch. I wanted to thank you all for your support for the town of Cave Creek in supporting us in our effort to have our own fire service for the town of Cave Creek that ultimately led to us being accepted as part of Daisy Mountain Fire District into the regional automatic aid system. And we couldn't have done it without the support from everyone who's a member of regional automatic aid. So thank you again.
Thank you, Carrie. Any other comments from the committee? Okay. Hearing none, business is now concluded and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for accommodating the change in time and date today. I know it's unusual to have a Thursday meeting like this, but thank you all for your flexibility, and we'll see you next month.